we'll start with Bryce Young. It's a guy who's getting a lot of attention. He's anticipated to be one of the top 2 picks in this draft, and if that is the case, he would be the 3rd quarterback drafted in the 1st round that is under 6 feet tall. He measured in at 5'10". I don't personally see this as a big concern, but Felder, I want your point of view. How do you think his height affects his ability to play in the NFL?
I don't think his height's a problem at all. If I'm worried about something, I'm looking at 204 as the heaviest that he's ever been, because the reality of it is, what do you think he plays at, like 187, 192?
Yes, right in that range. I'm saying probably the high 180s, and that's a bit of a problem, as we both know. I look at the height situation as he made a lot of plays at Alabama. He was at the highest stage at Alabama. He had some good weapons there, no doubt, but I'm sure whoever drafts him is going to want to get some good guys around him. And I feel like shorter quarterbacks have a natural feel to the game of football that the bigger guys don't have, because they don't have the opportunity to see everything as it develops. They have to see the pass rush differently, and they have to be able to move, and he's used that mobility to his advantage. So for me, it's certainly not the height, but I do want to check in on this weight thing that you talked about. Weighed in at 204 at the combine, declined the weigh in at pro day. Probably wasn't throwing at pro day at 204. We anticipate he's somewhere in that 190 range. But Felder, when you get to the NFL, you're going to go up against the Aaron Donalds of the world. You got the Jalen Carters that are going to be coming into the league. And I see a bit of a question about durability, considering that Bryce Young played a little bit banged up this past year when he makes the transition.
How often? I don't think he's going to get hit. That's the big thing. That was my biggest takeaway. I went back and watched a lot of Bryce Young, and he doesn't get hit. He doesn't take risks that allow him to get hit. He does not get hit. This is not a guy that you're going to hit. Drew Brees, a very similar situation there. Like, he's not going to sit around in the pocket for you to hit him. He's going to move. He's going to move this way. He's going to move that way. He's going to move. And so the big thing for me when I look at Bryce Young is, was he a runner? No. Right? Like, he's not Russell Wilson even. Russell Wilson was more of a runner than him. And Russell Wilson, I wouldn't even classify as a runner. But the reality for me is, I look at him, one, the rules. The rules are going to protect him. You cannot hit quarterback. And if you draft a quarterback number 1 overall, and unless they're, and I guess, later on in the show, like in the next edition of the show, we'll talk about Anthony Richardson. But unless you're Anthony Richardson or Cam Newton, like a huge, like a Hulk, they're going to protect you. They're going to protect you to the max. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how this works. And for me, I think he's still QB1. Size is not a concern. And here's the cool thing, and you know this as well as I do, because you're an Ohio State guy. He didn't have to do check with me's.
Right.
Bryce Young wasn't doing check with me's. Bryce Young was he's running plays.
No, I mean, that's an important piece of evaluation here when you start to dig into these quarterbacks, because so many times on Saturdays we do see the guys looking over at the genius coordinator over there on the sideline, getting him into the perfect play. And Bryce Young understood what he needed to do to get that perfect play by himself. So I'm definitely there. I do want to touch on weaknesses, though, because I think he's got a pretty complete game. Maybe not the strongest arm of the quarterbacks that we're going to see, but I don't think he needs to operate like that. Biggest thing I see out of him weakness-wise is footwork. And I think part of it is because he's a smaller quarterback. His footwork doesn't necessarily look clean. His drops are a little bit unconventional. Is there anything that you see in his game that makes you say he's going to have to improve on this to be a top-tier quarterback in the NFL?
I think unconventional is the perfect verbiage for that. But Drew Brees' footwork was also unconventional, right? Like, it was this like weird like shuffle pattern that they had. And Bryce Young has a lot of that same shuffle pattern where he's like, oh, okay, I got it. And I think that's also where you have to find your lanes. If you get a double team here, okay, I got to move a little bit over here. If you get you get one guy coming here and a blitzer coming, you got to step back and then move around. Like, he's got all that little. I think his footwork, it's not traditional, but I think it is immaculate, because he finds ways to get out of trouble, and then he creates a space for himself. Boom, a window. That's where I'm throwing the football.
Yeah, I think it's really important. There is that delineation, too, because I think his footwork has been a big advantage for him. But if he's going to be in a little bit more of a conventional system, it's something that's going to have to be cleaned up.